At lunchtime, some girls stood by the classroom window and looked down at the school field. A boy in a tracksuit was running after a ball, not looking up once. Why did someone who seemed to avoid being watched become the person everyone watched? I remember him as the kind of boy people spoke about quietly. He was not the most obviously handsome boy in school. I remember his grades. I remember the sound of girls cheering during sports day when he ran past everyone and crossed the line first. But more than that, I remember the silence he seemed to carry. Not an empty silence, not the kind that pushes people away, more like a private gravity, something contained, inward, difficult to enter. This is one memory from where I stood, and this is not really about a boy. It is about the room that taught me what kind of person was worth wanting. Because attraction is personal, of course it is. There were people I liked simply because I liked them, but the older I became, the more I realized that taste does not grow in an empty room. Mine had grown inside Korean classrooms, inside certain ideas of goodness, modesty, restraint, and what made a person feel safe to want. For a long time, I thought that was simply my taste. Later, in other countries, I began to hear that taste with an accent. In middle school, there was a boy many girls liked. Some confessed directly, some watched from far away and pretended they were not watching. Some became quieter than usual when his name came up. He was almost always the top of the class, but it was not only the studying. At lunchtime, when the boys went outside to play football, something shifted inside the classroom. The air still held the smell of lunch trays and chalk dust. Desks were slightly crooked. A chair scraped the floor. Someone leaned toward the window. Then someone else followed. Below, the boys moved across the field in their tracksuits. And then, there he was. He did not wave. He did not perform. He did not seem to know how many people were watching. Or maybe he knew and refused to show it. On sports day, when he ran in the relay, the quiet watching became sound. Girls who usually tried to stay composed shouted when he overtook another runner and crossed the line first. Still, what I remember most is not the cheering. I remember how quickly he returned to silence after being noticed. He was not trying to be watched. That was part of why everyone watched. At that age, I did not have language for what I was noticing. I only knew that some people made a room turn toward them. Some did it through beauty, some through humor, some through the easy confidence of already knowing they were liked. His pull worked differently. He carried achievement without making it sharp. He could be first in class without seeming hungry for praise. He could run faster than the other boys without turning victory into theater. That combination felt rare. There were other students who studied well. There were other boys who played sports well, but with him, the abilities gathered into a larger impression. They seemed to say character, a good student, a good athlete, a good person. The Korean phrase I grew up hearing was 착한 사람, a good person, a kind person, a decent person. It sounds almost too plain in English. But around me, that phrase carried real weight. It meant someone upright, not selfish, not arrogant. Someone who noticed when another person needed help and helped without needing to be seen doing it. someone who did not take up too much space, even when they had reason to. Adults used that phrase as praise. Friends used it as trust. And in the classroom where I grew up, it had also, quietly, become a kind of beauty. In that room, excellence became more attractive when it looked modest. I did not say this at the time, but I liked him too. Not in a dramatic way, not in the way stories usually make first crushes into a beginning or a confession. It was more contained than that. A private direction of attention. A small, recurring awareness I kept folded inside myself. I was curious about him. He seemed difficult to know. Not because he was empty or cold, but because he seemed to have an inner life he did not feel the need to display. I wanted to know what he thought alone, and whether his silence felt heavy to him or natural. And there was something else. Something in his quietness felt close to mine. Only later did I begin to see the edge of that attraction. The qualities I admired were not false. Kindness, humility, self-possession. I still feel drawn to people who do not need every room to orbit around them. But I also began to see how tightly attraction and moral approval had been braided together. It was not enough for someone to be interesting. He had to seem good. Not only talented, but humble. Not only attractive, but restrained enough to be trusted. There was comfort in that. A person who did not reveal too much felt safe. A person who helped quietly seemed deeper. But there was pressure folded into the same lesson. If restraint was attractive, too much self-expression could seem suspect. If humility was beautiful, wanting to be seen could feel like a defect. No one taught me this as a rule. It moved through reactions, through praise, through the lowered tone girls used when they said someone was nice. Attraction did not arrive as a rule, it arrived as a room. Years later, in other rooms, offices, dinners, unfamiliar cities, I began to notice that attraction did not translate as cleanly as I had imagined. Some parts of my taste traveled with me. Others began to change shape because the rooms around me were rewarding different things. I remember standing at a small gathering after I had been living abroad for a while, holding a paper cup I did not want, listening to a man I had just met move easily through the conversation. He spoke before silence had time to settle. He made people laugh without seeming to reach for it. He met everyone directly, as if taking up space had never required permission. I could see the appeal. There was warmth in that ease. There was the gift of making a room less awkward. There was a kind of generosity in not making other people carry the silence. That is not a small gift, but I noticed my own delay. Part of me admired him. Another part stood back, waiting for a different kind of evidence. How did he speak to someone quieter? Did he listen after he had finished being interesting? Did his humor make room for others, or only enlarge the space around himself? In some English-speaking rooms I entered, confidence seemed to arrive first and be welcomed first. I was not offended by it. I simply did not know how to trust it before I had seen what lived underneath. I was not losing my old sense of attraction. I was finally seeing where it had come from. Maybe that was my cultural memory moving inside desire. In those rooms, confidence could open the door, but for me, kindness still had to enter before I could stay. Then the thought turned back toward me. And once I saw that desire could be trained, I could not stop at the question of men. If the image of an attractive man could change from one room to another, what about the image of an attractive woman? What had I learned to become? I remembered sitting at a table years later, noticing myself soften an opinion before anyone had challenged it, not because I had changed my mind, because some old instinct had already begun arranging me into a more agreeable shape. I had not known I was making a calculation, but I was. And when I followed that thread, I found others. The times I made my voice smaller before anyone asked, the times I trimmed the edges of a thought because I feared its full shape, the times I mistook being loved for being easy to hold. Be smart, but carry it lightly. Be strong, but keep something soft enough to be protected. Have opinions, but don't let them take up too much room. I do not say this as a clean accusation. I say it because I recognize the traces in myself. The same room that made restraint attractive in a boy had also made restraint feel necessary in me. It had shaped not only what I noticed, but how I edited myself before being noticed. And that realization was uncomfortable, because it meant I had not only been learning whom to want, I had also been learning how to be wanted. When I return to that classroom window in my memory, I still understand why we watched him. A boy running across the field, a boy returning to his desk as if attention had not touched him, a boy whose ability seemed quieter than other people's desire to be seen. There was something beautiful in that. There still is. I do not want to throw away the part of me that recognizes gentleness, composure, the rare confidence of someone who can be capable without becoming loud. But I hold that feeling more carefully now, because the same room that taught me to admire quietness also taught me at times to hide inside it. The same room that made modesty beautiful sometimes made desire feel shameful. So the question is not whether that old attraction was wrong. It is whether I can keep what was tender in it without keeping what made me smaller. Maybe growing between cultures does not erase what we desire. Maybe it teaches us to hear the accent inside it. And maybe that is the hardest part of growing out of a room, not leaving everything behind, only learning which parts of it still belong to me. Maybe attraction is never completely private. Maybe it carries memory. Maybe it carries language. Maybe it carries all the rooms where we first learned who was worth watching. And maybe growing older is not about becoming immune to those old feelings. Maybe it is learning to ask, quietly, which part of my desire is mine, and which part still belongs to the room that raised me.